nature, horrifying place, cruel, unjust, merciless. Yet also warm, nurturing, and dignified. It is not hard to see how people have revered and respected nature with such awe throughout our history. It is truly magnificent from its broadest strokes to its smallest details. All throughout nature there is as much beauty as there is danger. The tiny patches of ground underneath our feet are fascinating microcosms of their own, each telling a unique story. It is no wonder that Shigeru Miyamoto, the acclaimed director of Devil World, would seek to further employ the video game medium in an attempt to recapture the sublime nature of nature. According to a seldom verified myth, Mr. Miyamoto was hanging out in his garden, standing in a place not too different from this one, staring intently at some grotesque flower for 48 minutes before he had fully realized the concept for Pikmin, his peculiar venture into the strategy genre. Regardless if this story is true or not, it is no secret that Pikmin borrows significant thematic and aesthetic cues from gardening. From the pleasantly ordinary setting and the naturalistic ambitions to the flowery operations of your playing pieces, Pikmin focuses on some bizarre, half-amusing observation that a gardener might look a bit like a spaceman, and runs full force with it. Granted, although this is not too unusual for the company that also brought you noodle boxing and paintball squids, it is certainly striking. And I suppose Pikmin's enviable commitment to its goofy presentation has encouraged players to take its more thoughtful and serious elements in jest, wave them off as mere jokes. But are they? When Pikmin are sent off to helplessly die in hordes, when Olimar longs for his family and complains about his boss, when we collect an obscene amount of treasure and fruit, when castaways pile up like a festival camping spot, is it nothing more than a funny gag? Or is there more to it? Do these disparate elements amount to something else in the long run that makes us see these games for more than just the strangest flower in the pot? I undoubtedly believe yes, absolutely. So why not tag along on this excursion as we find out how Pikmin is a gardening game that is about everything but gardening. Everything you'll ever need to know about Pikmin can be found within the original game. Launched for the now cult classic, then object of ridicule, the GameCube, Pikmin is a simple action strategy game where you command vegetable troops around a miniaturized garden world. Its vibrant exterior is at first glance quirky and a bit cute, but will not shy away from getting alien and unsettling. Despite being set in what is essentially your backyard, the threat of nature itself is still palpable, and together with a constant ticking clock, the player's vulnerability is underscored from the get-go. Using little more than its mechanics, Pikmin manages to present ideas in a compelling and thoughtful manner. And since the series has remained relatively unchanged throughout the years, its themes are mostly consistent and enduring. In other words, the first Pikmin provides the groundwork which every subsequent game builds upon and is the lens through which we understand them. Its concise and focused structure lends it an uncontested sort of purity. One might even say that it's, coincidentally, the best game ever made. In the original Pikmin, we're introduced to the interstellar space trucker Captain Olimar, whose spaceship, the SS Dolphin, gets struck by a meteor during his travels and crash lands on an inhospitable planet. Upon waking, he discovers his trusty vessel has been broken up into 30 supposedly crucial parts, all hidden in inconvenient locations. Unfortunately, the energy of Olimar's life support system is running low, and the atmosphere of the planet just happens to contain high amounts of oxygen, an element extremely toxic to his people. It's now your job to find these scattered splangos, repair the ship, and escape within 30 days. Or else, it's game over. Luckily for Olimar, he's not alone in this endeavor, as he quickly stumbles upon the mystical carrot people, the titular Pikmin, strange earthly beings that grow from the ground like plants and reproduce by throwing junk and bug carcasses into big onion spacecraft. While having little strength of their own, the Pikmin are characterized by their large collectives, and similar to ants, use their vast numbers to gather material and defeat enemies much bigger than themselves. Using a whistle conveniently built into his spacesuit, Olimar finds that he can dictate and control the Pikmin to do his bidding, making his Herculean survival task a lot more manageable. Perhaps even plausible. And that's essentially what you do in the game. One lonely Pikmin soon multiplies exponentially into an entire army, which you then use to complete a myriad of important objectives. However, you don't ever control any of the Pikmin directly. Instead, your role as Olimar sees you taking indirect control, having them follow you around informations and assigning them tasks to perform, by literally throwing them at your problems. Olimar himself doesn't really get his hands dirty, rather he's the team leader, conducting the Pikmin's workflow. In some roundabout way, the player controls both Olimar and the Pikmin, but the game still places a clear contrast between them. On your travels, Pikmin will increase and decrease in numbers around their firm, unchanging whistle-blowing nucleus. Pikmin die and get replaced all the time with no great fanfare, but rather a whimper. Such are the merciless rules of nature. You may catastrophically lose 100 Pikmin and still be able to bounce back with relative ease. But you can't lose an Olimar. In comparison to how the Pikmin die after one hit, Olimar has a health bar which triggers a game over if depleted. Quite unsurprisingly, there is only one Olimar, and as such, he takes priority. In this way, the game signals that Olimar has more value than the Pikmin. Olimar is unique, a character, an individual. But the Pikmin are merely a collective, replaceable, a resource for Olimar to exploit. These two themes of resources and exploitation will manifest themselves in different ways with each passing game. But whether it be mechanically or narratively, they are nevertheless recurring cornerstones throughout the series. The Pikmin themselves are the most clear example of where these two aspects go hand in hand. As a resource, the Pikmin are conveniently quantifiable. Their carrying capacity is measured through firm and strict numbers, while a larger crowd will reliably decrease enemy health bars quicker. Because the Pikmin can be reproduced ad infinitum, the game can't measure their value further than the time it takes to reproduce them. Meaning that the loss of Pikmin life is a cost of resources, the penalty being the time it takes to grow more Pikmin. In turn, the exploitation of the Pikmin is expressed in a disinterest for them as individuals. Olimar may throw around Pikmin one by one, but apart from that, they're not differentiated from in more ways than their color and butts. When playing Pikmin, we do not meaningfully engage with them as anything but an anonymous collective, so their lives are trivial and our sympathy compromised. We don't know what the Pikmin are thinking. Whatever their wants or needs are is a mystery really, and their alliance has no clear gain apart from their supposed survival. In summary, the Pikmin have no real say when it comes to their work, and are essentially unpaid labor for us to unfairly benefit from. Olimar's mighty whistle will simply force them to do anything he commands. Wherever he goes, they follow, and wherever he points, they charge. Somehow, he hits a magical frequency that makes his subjects succumb without fail. How chilling. I mean, even if they are funny little vegetable people that emit cartoon coats upon death, I think the comparisons to unfavorable labor practices are quite easy to make. Olimar doesn't typically participate in the heavy lifting, so to speak. He's fully reliant on his workforce and the fruit of their labor, rather than his own. He's, for the moment, the space bourgeoisie who owns the metaphorical means of production. And even if the Pikmin proletariat haven't revolted just yet, the unspoken conflict between the two is clear to see. Olimar's spaceship is rebuilt on the backs of Pikmin. From their blood, sap and tears, every piece was transported and fitted back onto the craft. And at the end of the day, he leaves them empty-handed. It's fair to say that the Pikmin will need to band together and unionize to fight for safer working conditions if they are to be treated better by their crash-landing compatriots in the future. But alas, Pikmin rights seem to be nothing but a far-flung dream for now. Now, you may think we're exaggerating simply for comedic effect, and I mean, yeah, a little bit. We do certainly like having fun here. Haha! But with that said, I don't think our interpretation is that far-fetched either. I believe these are aspects that the developers at Nintendo also consider to some extent, especially when looking at the 2004 follow-up, Pikmin 2. Continuing from where the last game left off, Olimar manages to return to his home planet Hokotate once more. No sooner has he landed before learning that the company he works for has fallen into insurmountable debt. Scrambling to get their business back in order, his boss discovers that goods from the Pikmin world are surprisingly valuable, and immediately sends Olimar and his colleague Louie back to the trauma planet in a last-ditch attempt to save the company from bankruptcy. Right out of the gate, Pikmin 2 delivers a thematic whiplash shift that drastically broadens the themes presented in the first game. The conveniently vague game mechanics and bare-bones deserted island premise are gone. They can no longer justify our actions through a veneer of necessity. Instead, we're given a clear theme that runs throughout the entire adventure: the pursuit of money and riches. A theme much more vocalized and blatant than whatever musings Pikmin the First theoretically contained about survival. The idea of resources and exploitation are a lot more explicit this time around, because Pikmin 2 can no longer hide behind desperation. In Pikmin 2, the narrative is fueled by intent. As such, we return to the Pikmin homeland with new intentions, as it were. We fittingly revisit some of the same places, but with new eyes peering for new sights. The monthly time limit is gone, reduced to the perpetual rising and setting of the sun. Our life support is no longer an issue, and the journey back home no pressing concern. This time around, it's all business. So our goal is exclusively focused on the gathering of goods to pay off the company's debt. Any old junk will do. It all has a price tag. Every contribution helps. We must therefore explore far and wide, traversing new and treacherous environments, perhaps descending down metaphysical dream caverns which transcend time and space, all for a chance at converting one man's trash into another man's treasure. In this way, we are, in no short terms, commodifying the entire Pikmin planet. The angle of survival is gone. There is no necessity, apart from the performed economic struggles back home. The Pikmin do not have to be part of this debacle, but they inevitably become part of it because they are so conveniently manipulated, and because their planet is supposedly an unexploited wilderness. In this game about money and ownership, it is pressing to note how the Pikmin are never considered in that equation. They're not granted even a semblance of ownership. So Olimar and Louie are free to ransack the planet to their heart's content. Nothing more than animals, the Pikmin are simply made to watch and participate as the space aliens collect this planet's treasures. It's clear that the Hotel Freight Company perceived the Pikmin world as unclaimed land, and through their actions, they figuratively planted a flag on the soil. And for what? Some menial trinkets they don't fully comprehend the origin or application of, all gathered to be sold off as curiosities to some rich pricks. The company has no grander purpose to their excursion apart from monetary gains. They're not conducting valuable research or anything of the sorts here. Hokotate doesn't need this junk. Granted, you may argue that the Pikmin don't need this stuff either, but that's kinda sidestepping the issue. It's safe to say that the Pikmin don't fully comprehend what's going on in this game, and evidently it's never of pressing concern for anyone to make them understand either. In this case, their blissful ignorance is as beneficial as their unpaid labor. The exploitation of the Pikmin leads to the exploitation of their land. One resource begets another. However, Pikmin 2 isn't content stopping there. No, it further complicates the depiction of exploitation by adding another crucial link in the chain of command, and asks the question, who tosses the Pikmin tosser? Why, it's the uncharismatic company president, of course! Chacho! Suddenly, the power dynamic of the original game is made more interesting by no longer rendering Olimar as the top dog. Not only is there someone standing above him, but he's not alone either, having been joined by his colleague Louis, making Olimar a little less special, and dare I say, a little more replaceable. He doesn't even need to do all the executive commands anymore. Heck, Olimar can die now, and it's only half the skin off your back. Both mechanically and thematically, Olimar is reduced to yet another expendable resource to be exploited. It is revealed that our little Hokotation friends aren't that dissimilar from the Pikmin. As a matter of fact, they too are tossed around to do someone else's bidding. We can no longer satisfyingly point fingers and pin the blame on these guys, because while exploiting the Pikmin and their world, they're not even directly benefiting from it. They are merely another cog in the machine, made to endure the ugly underbelly of their business, while the rat-ass responsible keeps his hands clean. Needless to say, this depiction of Olimar lends the character a new sort of depth that came to define him from here on out. In the original Pikmin, we could only define Olimar in contrast to the Pikmin. We could sort of deduce that he was more of a clueless oaf than some romanticized explorer. But our view was nevertheless fueled by his irrefutable dominance over the titular carrot people. That relationship to the Pikmin is still the same this time around. Nothing has changed in that department. Rather, we're given more context to the other side of Olimar. The role he has in his society, who he is to his people. Which is to say, just some regular guy with an unflattering delivery job. He's a space trucker, forced to endure long shifts and overtime for a presumably meager wage. At best, he's some sort of middle manager, the medium between his employer and the Pikmin. But in every other facet, he is at the bottom of the ladder. All the hard work he does is merely for the benefit of his boss and the hope of his continued employment. Even when his work tasks suddenly revolve around hoarding riches, it is still not for him to keep. Unentitled to his own labor, forced to brave immense dangers, Olimar must once again risk it all, because, oh, would you look at that? It seems the suffering you went through on the Pikmin planet has given you crucial workplace experience. Put that on a resume. So at the detriment of his own time and well-being, Olimar has to bear the burden and walk an extra mile in his downtrodden shoes. Filled with a longing that is hauntingly similar between both of the games. He is only thinking about returning to his home and seeing his family again. In the first Pikmin, he is prohibited by the circumstances of an accident, and in the second, he is forced to work perpetual overtime. In a surprisingly bleak and morbidly comedic depiction of working class struggles, crushingly long hours away from what's really important to you, is metaphorically the same as being stranded on an uncharted planet while suffocating to death. And this longing never dissipates. Instead, it remains one of his strongest character traits throughout the entire series. Olimar is an exhausted worker who can never quite catch a break. Again and again he will find himself in Pikmin planet predicaments, and as always, his one motivator is the faint chance of, maybe, seeing his wife again. Pikmin 2 speaks loudly through its working-class overtones, giving us a refreshingly crass interpretation of the groundwork established in the first game. It's not too shocking that this would be made in an industry that expects employees to crunch and sacrifice their personal life to monstrous projects which mostly benefit some faceless executive. It should be relatable to anyone who's ever been stuck at a dead-end job, forced to give their all for a little acknowledgement. Is it any wonder that the first game's promotional tie-in song Ai no Uta was such an unexpected breakaway success that it outsold even the game itself? With its lyrics of unreciprocated hard work and self-sacrifice, the Pikmin struggles directly translates to the plights of the worker, especially resonating with the Japanese salarymen, according to legend. Which is not too hard to believe. I'd buy it. So at the end of that long, dark tunnel, when the debt is finally paid off and the company saved from bankruptcy, what awaits Olimar? Why more work, of course? You're not surprised, are you? As soon as he has painstakingly pulled the company up by his bootstraps, Olimar is once again forced to return to the Pikmin planet for the third time. The ride never ends. You see, the moment his boss Shitshow realizes that the gathered wares was barely a fraction of the planet's riches, the goalpost is moved and he sets his next sight on becoming filthy rich, as it were. The sole problem is that when returning back to Hokotate, Olimar catastrophically forgot to bring along his companion Louis, stranding him somewhere on the Pikmin world. In what may seem to be an uncharacteristically brave and heroic move, the president decides to return in Louis' stead, replacing him for the rest of the game. Is he doing this out of the good of his heart or fear of litigation? I'd say neither. I take it he's simply that desperate for riches and left no other choice with Louis gone. That short-sighted quest for money is quite succinctly expressed through the boss's first course of action, which is to replate the company ship with a tacky gold finish in preparation for the next expedition. Keep in mind that this is literally the moment when he's out of debt. Not when he actually has the money, just the part where he's only broke. It's no wonder Hokotate Freight always seems to be in trouble, leaving Olimar to perpetually pick up the slack of his careless superior. When you think about it, I suppose Olimar's boss is the real true final boss, from a meta angle. Here we are, replacing our bumbling colleague with the rare shop floor sighting of the manager, twisting the narrative by being handed the reins to the oppressor. The president's fate is now in our hands. He will be no more competent or incompetent than we make him, muddying the waters of our sympathy. I think it's curious that many people default to the interpretation that Louis is the true hidden villain of the story, what with him taking control of a giant spider mech as the final battle, and hiding the secret that his hunger was the cause of the massive company debt in the first place. And yeah, maybe Louis is an asshat, but he is our asshat. We do not fall for underhanded tactics of infighting and shifting the blame. The real villain always was, and forever will be, the capitalists. And the ultimate challenge of Pikmin 2 is not losing sight of our principles. The boss needs you, but you don't need a boss. Stand up, my Hokotation comrades. For unity, we may slay the Bulborb yet. Pikmin together strong. The way that the Hokutate Freight Company LLC treats their employees is, however, not an isolated incident caused by unfortunate circumstances. Within this unbalanced system, their unfair treatment is perpetual. In the periphery of Pikmin 3's narrative, our weary workers are still doing the same old crap as before. It seems that their suffering never ends. Once again, Olimar and Louie are sent back to the treacherous Pikmin planet in hopes of collecting even more valuables. It turns out that the company has somehow found itself in yet another tricky financial situation, and as always, it falls on the workers to pick up the slack. Despite the debt unofficially being caused by one of the company president's poorly conceived business ventures, he still yells orders and commands to his henchmen while relaxing on a faraway beach somewhere, more rude and crass than ever before.
Those Pikmin are company property, not yours. If a fellow employee needs them, I expect you to share. How else are you supposed to get my treasure out of that cave? You imbeciles! How could you leave an entire spaceship behind? I don't want to see your face around here until you bring it back!
Having had some personal experience with the dangerous planet doesn't seem to have humbled the president to the perils his workers have to face. Rather, that has evidently just emboldened his self-perception, making him fancy himself an expert in the matter. In his own warped worldview, the boss is able to do the work at least 10 times better and faster, meaning that his employees should obviously strive to do the same. This culminates in Olimar and Louie making it back to Hokutate by the skin of their teeth, only to be turned around at the front door to go back to the planet again, because they forgot to bring back the debris of their demolished ship. Company property is apparently more important than workplace safety. All the while, Olimar has to silently bear it all with a smile on his face and the hope of once more returning home. Some things never change. Having said that, we cannot in good faith read all of Pikmin 3 as a continuation of the labor angle found in Pikmin 2. This is merely a little side story tacked onto the main course, meant to show us what happened to Olimar in the unseen parts of the narrative. Breaking from previously established ruts, Pikmin 3 thus takes on a new theme for the series, re-establishing that the core format can be skewed and interpreted from many lenses and perspectives. Due to booming population growth and poor foresight, the people of planet Kopai have exploited their world's natural resources to a breaking point and are just about to run out of food. In hopes of finding edible matter elsewhere, the intrepid explorers Alf, Brittany, and the other guy braved a long journey to the bountiful Pikmin planet. Contrasting with the previous game, this trio isn't exactly composed of regular workers, but specialists on a world-scale rescue mission. The stakes are high and are cast the right people for the job. Although, that doesn't stop Pikmin 3 from remaining true to everything established in the first game. The Kopaites crash land like utter buffoons, quickly stumble upon the Pikmin and promptly use them to ease their grandiose quest for survival, leading us through the same motions with similar motivations. At its core, this tale is still about resources and exploitation. We are simply expanding what that entails. Resources can take on many forms, and exploitation can be performed at many levels. Much like Olimar's predicament in the first game, our Kopite compadres are likewise an agreeable bunch. Arguably even more so, considering that the survival of their entire world is resting on their shoulders. One might presume this was Nintendo's attempt of subtly shifting the series' ideals to better fit their sterile post-GameCube image. Mind you, the overt corporatism of Hokutate is still present in the game, but it's drastically subdued by the prominent altruistic lean of the Kopai expedition. The gang's mission is as clear as it is sensible. We must feed the hungry, and we must do so responsibly. As such, you travel around the planet gathering fresh fruit of all shapes and sizes, focusing more on a diverse selection to regrow rather than sheer volume. Every day, the explorers need to drink from their use stock to sustain themselves, always with strict and orderly rations so as to diminish as little as possible. Evidently, the Kopai guys approach their task with great seriosity, because beyond their own survival, there is something grander at stake. However, under scrutiny, it's hard not to conclude that whatever predicament Kopai has found itself in isn't too dissimilar from Hokotate. While we are never given a particularly clear picture of their plight, as it's never spoken about in more than vague terms, what we have here is still telling.
Due to a booming population, booming appetites, and a basic lack of planning.
In other words, the planet Kopai has faced growth that doesn't match their production. The vague comedic undertone might suggest short-sighted gluttony on a global scale, although it's not far removed from the prevalent sci-fi concerns of food shortages. The Kopaites may not have resorted to eating Soylent Green just yet, but their predicament is still similar to the man-eating dystopia Charlton Heston had to endure. Eco-disaster has made natural resources dwindle and perish, regrowth is out of the question, and demand is only rising. In comparison, Hokotate may still be self-sustaining, but the signs of over-commodification and class disparities will still surely lead them down the same path. Kopai is much the same, they're merely a few steps ahead in the apocalypse race. With this in mind, it's no wonder the Pikmin planet would be as tantalizing for Kopai as it was for Hokotate. The place absolutely brims with fruit, much like it previously burst with treasure. With little difficulty, our microscopic friends are able to explore a few modestly minuscule square meters of the planet and swiftly gather enough food matter to avert their worldwide catastrophe. This natural richness is cleverly conveyed through the game's more inventive incarnation of a ticking clock. Every time you collect a fruit, it's processed to produce canisters of juice to bring back to Kopai. Every evening, our explorers must drink a bit of it to sustain themselves for the next day. However, as many players have noted, this restriction never provides much pressure, as your daily gathering easily surpasses the daily consumption, leading to an ever-expanding and untouched surplus. I don't find this relaxed time restriction to be detrimental though. Rather, it's effective mechanical conveyance, showing us how bountiful the Pikmin world is through our own actions, using context that makes immediate sense to us as gamer-brained individuals. I sincerely don't think Nintendo expected players to actually run out of food and lose the game, unless they actively tried to do so. It's merely a neat and tangible lose state to contrast with the predominantly triumphant tone of the adventure. The Kopai are doing fine. They will make it out okay in the end. Even when Louis shows up and steals the entire use stock, the player will quickly regather more fruit and mitigate the damage. Clearly, on this world, food is never an issue. Not even when you run out of it. Coming from a planet on the brink of collapse, the untouched and unclaimed wilderness of this world is everything our protagonist could have hoped for. A lush paradise overflowing in natural resources that are openly lying about, free for the taking. As the Kopaites discover this planet and explore its vast riches, they never ask who owns this or if they're justified in their endeavor. As always, no one considers the man-made traces and artifacts as real signs of civilization. They're never seriously discussing the possibility of others like them living here. At the very least, they're certainly not humoring the role the Pikmin would play in this matter. Of course not. They're just a featureless carrot collective, the ant hive mind lacking intelligence and comprehension. They're nothing but mindless animals, unknowing and unfeeling. However, I think Pikmin 3 is the game that truly breaks the camel's back on that line of thought. Through small insinuations, it becomes increasingly apparent that the Pikmin indeed do possess some sort of self-consciousness. The Pikmin have always been a lot more clever and sophisticated than we give them credit for. Ever since the first game, they've been able to build all kinds of marvelous constructions, ranging from your regular old mound to structurally sturdy bridges, all with no greater specification than a whistle blow and their own intuition. And this knack for creation is merely one facet of how they express their culture. When Pikmin gather in groups, they joyfully sing the songs of their people. They play together, they sometimes communicate through gestures, and they seem to have some form of language. Perhaps they lack the coordination the player brings to the table, but everything else is performed by them. After all, not even the greatest coach in the world could teach a carrot to play fetch. The Pikmin are simply conducted to perform the tasks they've always been able to do. So, halfway through Pikmin 3, we stumble upon a curious data log from Captain Olimar, commenting on mysterious murals he's been seeing during this latest expedition. We curiously look around to find this. A wall painting depicting the Pikmin's relationship to their interstellar visitor, the tall and mighty Olimar. Imposingly capable, incomprehensibly knowledgeable, arriving from beyond the stars to give them the tools to do the impossible. With tiny hands expressing their own sense of perception, one Pikmin has observed their role in the universe and created God. Their dreams and imagination stamped onto the world, eagerly calling out,
"Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?"
What right does anyone have to use the Pikmin? To break the Prime Directive and interfere with their budding civilization? The more we examine the Pikmin and learn about their ways, the more questionable their treatment becomes. The way the player is continuously asked to exploit them doesn't rub right with their slowly emerging humanity. We descend upon their world as travelers from faraway lands, abuse their trust to get what we want from them, something we have come all this way to claim, and then we leave the Pikmin behind, giving nothing in return. Looking at it this way, it's hard not to notice the strong colonialist motifs that are running rampant throughout the entire Pikmin franchise. Now, hold on just one darn second. I know there are like 4 viewers out there who stumbled into this video by accident and are wondering if we're trying to cancel Pikmin or something. So for them, no, we're not. Colonialism is a real thing that's had a tremendous global scale effect on our world. Applying a post-colonial lens onto Pikmin isn't an attempt to highlight it as outstanding among its peers. It's merely an observation that it does indeed uphold certain colonial motifs.
Hello, friend.
These are signs that permeate media and which have been lended certain meanings through historical context. Questions that arise when we observe thematic ideas, such as the exploration and conquering of the unknown, the acquisition of seemingly unclaimed resources or artifacts, and the overall representation of foreign cultures. Video games are ripe with these patterns, but Pikmin in particular displays additional detail that strengthens the reading. In Pikmin, we play as a stranger from a different land who arrives in the Pikmin's world. This person quickly comes to use the Pikmin as their workforce to complete tasks that are extraneous from the Pikmin themselves. In this way, be it olimar survival, the debt repayment, or fruit gathering, we exploit the Pikmin's labor, we exploit their resources, and we exploit their land. Everything is up for grabs, whether it be food, ancient artifacts, or the indigenous population. Wiping out the local flora and fauna isn't even considered an issue. Overarchingly, we exploit their very culture, creating an irrevocable dent in their lives by our mere presence and harsh demands. In this exertion of our might, an immediately apparent power dynamic is formed. Despite being larger and sturdier than the Pikmin, our player avatars don't possess the same strength as even a single Pikmin. Rather, their capabilities are presented through commandeering and leadership, attributes provided directly by the player, in stark contrast with the more rigid computer-controlled Pikmin. The convenient mechanical shorthands that make for a comprehensive and readable experience likewise help to fuel this contrast between oppressor and oppressed. The Pikmin are neatly categorized by their looks and capabilities. We sort them by color to do certain tasks, and we grade their competence for said task by their individual growth level. In this way, we other the local inhabitants, reduce them into little more than numbers and specimens. Like we touched upon before, in comparison, our protagonists are clearly defined, vibrant personalities with their own thoughts and voices, always distinguished as more important and valuable than the Pikmin. And this is a perspective that is always maintained. We never take direct control of any one Pikmin, and we never get to consider their outlook. So by that metric, all the games are colored by a certain gaze. We see the world from the eyes of the explorer. We can only understand and sympathize as much as they're willing to. Take for example the various mission logs that dot the games, which admittedly do express some interest in researching the Pikmin, but they nevertheless mostly focus on documenting the mechanics of the game, as in all the ways the Pikmin can be used as tools. Granted, this is just a glorified tutorial, but it's nevertheless interesting how Nintendo presented it within the confines of the fictional world itself. They didn't need to make this diegetic, but they did. And now that contributes to our view of how Olimar and the other space goobers perceive the Pikmin, as pure utility that can only bring them closer to their goals.
Red Pikmin are good fighters. Yellow Pikmin are good at digging. Blue Pikmin can attack while swimming.
Even if the Pikmin are presented as willing to help out with whatever you throw them at, no matter if you were personally invested in taking care of them to the best of your abilities, making sure that no one is left behind at night, there is still a clear power imbalance here. The explorers we play as will approach the Pikmin with wild disregard, which in turn allows us to haphazardly toy with their lives without much repercussion. You may feel bad about losing your troops in a treacherous battle, or because of your own clumsy mistakes, let's be honest. But once it's all over, you just produce more and forget about it. Even if you are trying your best to not mistreat them, there is simply no way of playing these games without exploiting the Pikmin. They are, after all, the main way that you interact with the world around you. Through this lens, Pikmin admittedly becomes a bit of a bummer. A little #problematic perhaps, and even somewhat irresponsible. After all, it is the one reading of the games that most firmly places you in the shoes of the oppressor, and there isn't much in the text to circumvent that notion. Despite hanging out with them for most of the playtime, we never see the Pikmin's perspective, and that means that the only viewpoint we are given is that of the colonizer. For lack of alternative, they are practically validated in their actions because there is no meaningful contrast. Are Nintendo intentionally glorifying this form of oppression, or are they merely unfortunately insensitive? I'd lean on the latter, But still, it's hard to shake how the mechanics of the game softly reinforce an essentialist difference between the space travelers and the Pikmin. These motifs are still present and flow together a little too neatly for it not to be a real and sensible angle to approach the games from. To be charitable, I will say that we can still take these elements and suggest that Pikmin is a form of critique that displays the ills of colonialism by making the player complicit. And if that made you uncomfortable because it felt wrong, well, I guess you engaged with the text. This leads us to the recently released Pikmin 4, which, for the moment, will have to serve as our grand conclusion. Pikmin 4 was preceded by some cute short films, a funky mobile application, and a surprisingly excellent Hey Pikmin, Yes Shut the Fuck Up, all of which further amplify the Pikmin brand in their own unique ways. But I feel this latest game in particular was the first in a while to further the thematic through line. I guess that's why they gave it a number, signifying that it's indeed the proper continuation of the first 3 games. Although I know some of you may get hung up on the whole canonicity debacle and focus on what order these games are set in, or what even constitutes for canon or not. I don't care about that. What's important is that these games share an identity in all manners of design and aesthetics, always expressing and evolving the core ideas in new ways. For the sake of argument, all of these stories take place somewhere at some point. And that's good enough. At the end of the day, the themes are more important, because themes transcend canonicity. That's a trademark transparency line right there. In Pikmin 4, Captain Olimar has once again, for the first time, crash-landed the SS Dolphin on a mysterious planet, and is forced to recover the missing pieces with the help from the Pikmin. However, this time around, things don't go quite as well for our Hocotation homie, as he fails his survival mission and never makes it off the planet. Instead, he sends out a last-ditch distress signal for the universe to answer. The message is picked up by the emergency organization, the Rescue Corps, who promptly depart for the Pikmin world to Olimar's aid. Only for them to also crash land and become stranded. What a pickle! As the final hope, it is thus your job to make an avatar that sorta looks like yourself and head off to the Pikmin world and sort out the whole ordeal. Pikmin 4 lends yet another perspective on the typical formula, this time with further distance than ever before. Our silent, undefined protagonist enters the fray with pure, selfless intentions. They only express what we express and only act the way we would, because they are a stand-in for us to project upon. Their mission is arguably the most agreeable one so far, to rescue the rescuers. What could possibly be more noble than a double rescue? Much like in Pikmin 3, we learn about the series' designated true protagonist, Captain Olimar, from the outside. We follow in his footsteps by reading the logs and solidify his portrait through the many ways people speak about him. There is a veritable mythologization going on around Olimar through sheer reputation, who people believe he is, or perhaps merely who they hope he is. For a considerable amount of the playtime, Olimar is straight up missing, having vanished in the traces of this mysterious fuzzball astronaut. Although, quite unsurprisingly, it soon dawns on the rescuers that this strange individual is indeed Olimar, but warped and transformed by unknown circumstances into a Pikmin-esque creature who can withstand the planet's deadly atmosphere. Preaching the time managerial principles of Gandori and converting unassuming subjects to his ways, Olimar has become something akin to a Pikmin god, the postmodern Colonel Kurtz, who we must frantically tail deeper and deeper into his new world in the faint hopes of stopping him. Taking a grab bag approach to the series' themes and motifs, Pikmin 4 zooms out the proverbial camera and gives us a comprehensive view of everything the previous games have talked about. Olimar's survival antics are simply a springboard for the rest of the story. Ideas of commodification, worker struggles, resource mismanagement, and the treatment of the Pikmin are still present. Observing a myriad of wildly different thoughts and convictions, it's striking that no one in particular takes true precedence. Because the protagonist is a silent blank slate, the point of view is more or less our own. We are given no consequent voice to guide a central theme, so the grand point of the entire game may appear obscured. However, for that reason alone, I think the holistic perspective is a good candidate. During your mission of locating the various members of the rescue corps, you'll soon stumble upon more people than you had accounted for. Ranging from unaffiliated researchers to clueless tourists, there is suddenly no end to this stream of far-flung astronauts. It turns out that Olimar's distress call had not been received by just the rescue corps. In fact, by now, everyone and their grandma has had the message land in their inbox. Curiously though, no one actually came to answer Olimar's call. Rather, they took it as an open invitation to his grand discovery. The Pikmin world. Like a gold rush of opportunity, all of these people thus went to the planet for their own personal reasons, all seeking something different. Como has come here to find a solution to the ecological collapse of her home planet in the wake of heavy industrialization. Shui is a travel agent who has dipped the Pikmin world's toes into the tourist industry through the Uncharted Planet Tour. Lapi, Boris and Frisey are all artists who have come to the planet in search of either inspiration or peace of mind. Mika and her students have taken the news of a hostile deadly planet as the perfect spot for a school field trip. Corgwin is a general contractor who somehow wants to build houses on the soil, and I can only assume that Chowder, the president of Tolbo Real Estate, is looking to bite his filthy teeth right down into that budding housing market. In a surprising reflection of our contemporary times, we also have the online streamer Molly, who's here in her desperate search of content and followers. Like and subscribe, by the way. And then, of course, there's Fox, whose solitary notable achievement in life has been to provide the circumstances for Pikmin 4 to be the first and hopefully last Nintendo game to ever include the term venture capitalist. I suppose it always comes to this sooner or later. It starts with one person finding an undiscovered, uncharted planet, who then goes home and tells some friends about it, and those guys in turn tell other people about it. All of a sudden, you have a situation where everyone both knows about the pie and wants a piece of that pie, all with their own impressions of what they want to do with the land and what they want to take from it. Through the growing town square worth of interstellar visitors, we get just about every possible angle on what this world is good for. Most of them substantial enough to constitute the main theme of its own Pikmin game. In this microcosm of opinions, it becomes clear that the true subject is the planet itself. And what could it then represent if not the untouched natural world? It is our planet, both literally and figuratively, as the last resort, the final frontier. Now, the Pikmin games have always had a peculiar relationship to our own reality, judging by the environments, cultural artifacts, and blatant geography. It's no secret that the games are set in blown-out micro-portions of Earth. The components are all familiar. It is merely the perspective that is novel. Through the eyes of a clueless and befuddled miniature alien, we explore ordinary gardens in ways that make them appear exotic and mysterious. We rationally understand that this is familiar ground, but the games never allow us to fully feel it. We visit unremarkable locations, the fauna is all wrong, and there is no sign of humanity apart from our ghastly traces. We never get a good glimpse of this world, so the picture is forever incomplete. This has unsurprisingly led to the common fan speculation observation that humanity is indeed absent, undone by some untold catastrophe, and that we're now walking through the abandoned remains, silently reclaimed by nature. Through radioactive mutation or eons of evolution, the fauna has transformed into Pikmin, bulborbs, snagrets, breadbugs, and all other kinds of freaks. I don't mean to diminish this interpretation, because I think a sensible message resides at its core, that our world is fragile, our presence fleeting, and life precious. Nature is beautiful, and we must fight to protect it, or else we will cause our own demise. However, I don't find the post-apocalyptic angle to be absolutely essential. Primarily, there isn't much pointing towards humanity necessarily being dead. Rather, we're just perpetually out of view. Maybe we are present somewhere behind the camera. Maybe we aren't. It doesn't make much of a difference, does it? When faced with the dramatized concerns of our little space travelers and their Pikmin pals, it's evident that humanity as we corporeally know it has no greater significance than the places we've created and the trinkets scattered about. Familiar spaces that become the scenes for the action and subject for the quirky lenses to run rampant over. I think it's important to acknowledge that humanity can be present in more ways than Chibi-Robo-esque lumbering giants, because it allows us to more thoroughly and honestly engage with the text. The truth is that humans are all over Pikmin. Humanity's presence is meaningfully found in the traces we leave behind, the everyday items we create and use in our lives. We are equally present in our roles as players, perceiving the events and sights in the game, and in turn, decoding them from our cultural context. But perhaps most important is in the form of all of those goofy space travelers. Be it Olimar, the Copites, or the Rescue Corps, the people in the Pikmin games have always been cheeky representations of humanity, inheriting all of our character flaws, complicated bureaucratic structures, and performative cultural practices. If the Pikmin planet is the exaggerated hostile stand-in for the natural world, these space aliens are equal approximations of our societal presence. The overplayed division between the two only further seals the deal. The explorers can't breathe oxygen, so they must wear protective suits, shutting them out from the rest of the world. They commandeer and conquer the local wildlife. Their lives are more precious, and their goals more important. It comically reflects how we commonly assume ourselves as external from nature, as heightened individuals, independent and unaffected by the ebbs and flows of the elements. We have constructed our own world around nature to shut it in and control it. We believe ourselves to have fully tamed the universe. But when we suddenly find ourselves trapped in its jaws, we are quickly rendered helpless and confused. Much like a Robinson Crusoe type, Captain Olimar must use his predicament and 100 Fridays to reconstruct himself through introspection, come to terms with his insignificance, and embrace his place in nature. Only then can he come out at the other end a more realized and humble person. In these dramatic meetings between astronaut and celestial body, I believe Pikmin takes the firm stance that we aren't independent. We're not magically enlightened metaphysical beings. No, like any other animal, we too exist as part of nature. We must work for survival, we must sustain ourselves, we must breathe the very air. In this way, I think the environmental leaning gains a more refined edge. We shouldn't see the Pikmin world and its visitors as separate, because they are two sides of the same coin, disembodied halves of ourselves. Together, they reflect the reality we live in, the uncountable clashes between society and nature. All of the ways the world around us is recontextualized through utility and application, when the one home we have becomes the ultimate resource to be exploited. The horror can only be rationalized by extracting ourselves from the equation as independent and unfazed entities. No different from impartial aliens ready to move on elsewhere. Pikmin is not frightening as a post-apocalypse tale of our ultimate demise, but rather as a proto-apocalypse, chronicling the circumstances that spur and perpetuate this situation. In contrast to previous games, Pikmin 4 is the first time where the cast is drastically larger than a few key characters. For all intents and purposes, these colorful castaways act as a portrait of humanity, one that is a bit bumbling and clueless, sometimes concerningly indifferent, at times alarmingly selfish, but also noble and agreeable. The main hub shows us a growing range of people, both benevolent, malevolent, and everything in between. When we come here, we are always allowed to talk to them, emphasizing how they have their own thoughts and ideas, dealing with their own problems in their own ways. They all understand this place, the natural world of the Pikmin planet, a little bit differently. Through their perspectives, we see that nature cannot be defined by a singular line of thought, and likewise, that humanity is not defined by one person. This depiction of mankind is broad, encompassing a little bit of everything. It even features a customizable avatar, effectively placing the player themselves smack dab in the middle of it all. However, despite their relatively strong influence on the game, it feels fair to say that this player character isn't exactly the sole acting ruler who decides everything. They're not even the captain, only a rookie trying their best on the first day of the job. In contrast to the disproportionate might characters like Olimar had in the past, this funky friend is expressly emphasized as one small part of a larger collective. A society, if you will. If mistreatment of nature is contextualized through our employment of Pikmin to gather resources, exterminate fauna, and build infrastructure, the player character is certainly complicit, but they're not solely responsible. The operation is spearheaded by a crew of specialists who all support the player's deeds in different ways, providing them with the tools and intel they need to accomplish various missions and tasks. And saving castaways results in even more busy work to commit at their behest. Being pushed and pulled in all directions, the player avatar will act as little more than the Pikmin whispering shore kid for everyone else in their community. Meaning that at best, the player avatar isn't exactly a mighty independent space captain, but rather just a pawn in someone else's game of chess. From an environmentalist angle, I think the message is pretty clear. While we may all be deeply concerned about issues of climate change, it is not feasibly your task to personally solve it. Because we cannot pin all of it on one individual, there's more than one billionaire after all, even if we find ourselves doing questionable things for a living, even if we acknowledge our role and change our ways, even if we campaign and encourage others to follow suit, it is still ultimately a systemic issue, spurred by the neglect of governments and corporations. It is societal structures like capitalism that exploit nature through pollution, deforestation, and mass extinction. As individuals, we can do our best to achieve small victories, and we should for the sake of all of us like guillotines, but we cannot reasonably expect to carry the entire burden and provide all of the answers ourselves. I think the same applies to Pikmin 4 and the powerless role the player avatar finds themselves in. We are participants, yes, but we carry no real influence and have no true solutions. At the end, everyone has been rescued and happily returns home. But the damage is done, while the natural world is once again left behind as something extraneous from your little commune. So it goes in Pikmin. We are recurringly faced with slightly relatable goals which we overcome through fantastical means. But the victories are always temporary, the outcomes relatively small scale. The shoddy ships keep crashing, the company keeps getting in debt, Kopai has no reason to confront their excessive consumption, and who knows how many more helpless castaways will accumulate from Olimar's report. We never face the problems at their core, nothing is ever truly changed or improved. We just have to hope that things go better from here on out. I'm left unsure if anything is ever actually learned in these games, but I suppose that merely reflects how conclusions and solutions are even harder to find in real life. In the 2 decades since the first game, we haven't solved any of the problems depicted in this series. They are large, troubling burdens on modern life, the hanging questions of our times. It would be dishonest to pretend that there is a simple outcome to be found in these games, that they somehow could present us with all of the answers. Because they can't. Let's be real here, it's fucking Pikmin, dude. I suppose Pikmin can do little else than act as a striking reflection of the world that made it. Perhaps that's why Nintendo let you play as yourself in the latest one, so you could more easily make the parallel to real life. Because I do think Pikmin is largely about humanity, about our actions, mindsets and systems, only filtered through a lens of distance. In this way, it seems humanity lives on for yet another day in our persistent, caricatured presence, and the audience that can find a sliver of themselves within. Will we free ourselves from these troubles, or will they spell our demise? Will there be a day when the post-apocalyptic reading becomes definitive? Well, I suppose at whatever point there is no one around to continue making Pikmin games. Look, the Game Boy Micro has an 8-hour battery life. There is just no way we're dead. Who do you think cut and slapped a sticker on this perfectly grown banana? There isn't even any corrosion on this battery stuck in the snow. Have you seen this kitchen? My current non-apocalyptic kitchen is in a worse state than this shit. Ultimately, when looking through all of the Pikmin games like this, we reveal how many different dimensions there are to the basic core concept of commanding hordes of carrots. All of the ways societal power structures are enacted and maintained. Throughout the years, the original Pikmin's simple framework has been reinterpreted and recontextualized to such richness that it now undeniably carries all of this potent meaning. Its simplicity and singular focus speaks louder and more broadly with time, enabling us to suddenly and easily make all kinds of interpretations ourselves in hindsight. It is a flower that continues growing and blossoming the more we feed it. It's safe to say that Pikmin has a message that only keeps getting more relevant the more it's allowed to speak. And as such, I can simply hope Pikmin will continue delivering on that core promise. There are so many Pikmin and so many Olimars out there. Surely, we could always learn about a few more.
Thanks for watching this video all the way to the end. I hope you liked it, and if not, well, I'm sorry. Anyway, this channel just turned 4 years old. Wow, can you believe it? I can't.
And if you want us to keep going for another 4 years, you should consider supporting us on Patreon. patreon.com/transparens. And if you do so, you will get access to our Discord, you get audio companions, and much, much more. And you know what? There's a lot of people who have done this. Just look at all these goobers. Acid Shark, All-Purpose Nobody, Afayette, Bibbidi Bitch, Colorado Hugge, Dave Pickett, Dr. Puntgusher Esquire, Eden Senta, Ember, Fran Rogers, Intungeon, Joy Content, King Kisaragi, Klaus Morals, Luna, Madeline Machado, Matthias Groman, Meowmix64, Mr. Tellius, Mosling, Naive Bayesian, Nichtschwert, Paperlanti, Radar of the Stars, Sarah Bloomer, Synchronize, TB Skyen, Yummy Shaggy,
Abigail Nail, Ada Avery, Ali, Anna Day, Anonymous, Aria Soria, Ari, Autumnmuse, Bad Wolfos, BK Flash, Blues Piranha, Butch Frivarg, Celeste, Charles Goldhaber, Chloe, Chloe Strange, Chris Marshall, LED Mox, Elliot Diebold, Emmy Murphy, Ephemeral Mist, Ferris Feline, Floofquist, Friend of Dracula, Fjorn, Fungal, Henrik, Hope, Indigo Trans, Infernal Ramblings, Yea I Are Not, Yeon John, Yay Mission, Yelligod, Jen, Kadath, Catherine Jibes, El Tantive, Marika, Maddie Madkip, Mar B, Mark Mahan, Michael Lee, Miles Seawind, Minched Fish, Mitch Haley, Neuropain, Nerbion, Passion Tentacle, Quasar Nebula, Robin, Saxon, Shonal McDoodle, Shogun, Sean Wolfbark, Silkmoth, Siliruki, Skyhoppers, Sleepy, Sleepy Slug, Soyborn, Surashu, Talia Parkinson, That Queer Birdman, Tiny Sam, VG, and Wooftree. And new this time are Aru, Limberbutt McCubbins, Nyako, and Paul Zadursky. There you have it, and if you listen this far, I'm gonna give you a little hint about the next video. It's about some variety of One Piece, but not at all in the way you're probably thinking right now. Maybe we'll talk about pirates some other time, I don't know. What's a good pirate game? Monkey Island? Sid Meier's Pirates? Skies of Arcadia? Uncharted Waters? Captain Havoc? Gosh, remember Claw? Dang, I wish pirates were real.
I feel just like a purple Pikmin.